Here is the recipe that I cook in this video. Feel free to screenshot, write it down, or copy from the description. This is Salisbury steak, a staple of Civil War-era health food crazes and terrible 60s TV dinners. There are many ways to cook this dish, but this one should come together in about 40 minutes. I am still on the keto diet, meaning I cannot eat carbohydrates, so I will be using low-carb substitutions, and I'll point them out as we come to them. This is yet another recipe that starts with an onion. Here I have a small yellow onion that I'm going to roughly chop. Set that aside while we go over to the stove. Take a small saucepot and add about a tablespoon of olive oil. Set your stove to medium heat and let that come up to temperature. Dump in your onions and sauté for just a few minutes before adding a half pound of white or portobello mushrooms. To this, add in a tablespoon of red wine vinegar and about a tablespoon each of salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Cook those down for a few more minutes. Note, if you're making the regular version of this recipe, at this point you will add 1 heaping tablespoon of flour and mix until the flour smell has faded. Regardless, at this point, pour in a 14-ounce can of high-quality beef broth, stir to combine, and to that, just add a couple glugs of Worcestershire Sauce. Cover the pot and bring the mixture to a gentle simmer. Lower the heat and just let that sit for at least 20 minutes to draw flavor out of those mushrooms. I know that may seem like a long time, but the good news is that it's roughly the time that it'll take us to prepare and cook our Salisbury steaks. Take a large, stable bowl, and to it, add about a pound of ground beef. I like to use a higher fat ratio for these, about 70-30, as the beefy flavor tends to get diluted by the added ingredients. Speaking of which, into the bowl, crack in 1 large egg and squeeze in about 2 tablespoons of ketchup. I'm using sugar-free ketchup for obvious reasons, but you do noticeably lose flavor doing so. Oh well. Additionally, add 1/3 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm using almond flour. A few glugs of Worcestershire sauce. Here I'm using my last bit of garlic paste, but feel free to add about a tablespoon of garlic powder. Grate in about 1 ounce or 2 of Parmesan cheese. Volume-wise, I ended up with about 3/4 of a cup. And finally, about a tablespoon of salt, pepper, and minced onion. Go ahead and, with your hands, mix the ingredients well until everything is fully incorporated. Warning, this mixture will be very cold and may be physically painful by the time you are done. Take a large plate, about the diameter of your largest skillet, and set that nearby. Take the meat mixture and separate it into 3 nearly evenly sized portions. Then, using your hand as a guide, form the portions into oblong steaks, roughly the length and width of your hand and between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch thick, depending on the size of your hands. The shape is useful in 2 respects. Firstly, it's convenient. The shape is just about the only thing that sets these apart from meatballs. And more importantly, these are roughly the size of my spatula, which will make flipping easier. Once these are formed, lay them out on the plate to check that they will all fit in the skillet. Speaking of which, at the stovetop, set your largest heat-resistant skillet, here I have cast iron, on the burner. Pour in about a tablespoon of olive oil and heat that on medium-high until the oil is shimmering but not quite smoking. Gently place in the Salisbury steaks and gently cook for about 2 minutes before flipping. Be careful with these as they are fragile and will break, like that one, if you are not careful. No matter, it's all getting covered in mushroom gravy in the end. After another 2 minutes, flip again and repeat until the exterior has a nice crust and the internal temperature reaches 150 degrees Fahrenheit. Remove those from the heat. Back at the mushroom gravy, the mushrooms have shrunk a fair bit and it smells amazing. Turn off the heat and, for richness, I like to add a couple tablespoons of butter. Mix that in, and if you added flour earlier, this would be done. But because I'm making this keto, I'm going to use Xanthan Gum. Note, I don't like the faintly nutmeg-like flavor I get from this, so I'm only going to add about a 1/2 teaspoon. As you will see, I should probably have added a bit more, but I was erring on the side of caution in this case. Just mix that up, and we are ready to serve. Just take one of the Salisbury steaks and pour over a generous portion of that mushroom gravy. And that is so good, especially those mushrooms. Now, this recipe does make more gravy than is needed for the steaks, so I would recommend serving this with mashed potatoes or some roasted green vegetables. Regardless of what you pair with it, though, this is an absolute treat, whether you're low carb or not, and I definitely recommend you give it a shot. And thanks for watching. Next week, I hope to give you my take on Sloppy Joes.